I was 24 when Buddy, my little Labrador mix, bolted out of the house and ran straight toward the edge of the forest. I had just stepped out to grab the morning mail when he slipped past my legs, barking and wagging his tail, oblivious to the danger of the dark woods. Panic hit me like a cold wave. I ran after him, calling his name, my voice breaking slightly. "Buddy! Buddy, come back!" But he didn't stop. The trees seemed taller than usual, the shadows deeper, and the forest loomed ahead like an endless dark sea. I paused, catching my breath, and realized I couldn't follow him alone. The thought of him getting lost, or worse, frightened me more than I cared to admit. Glancing toward the neighboring house, I spotted Landon Hale leaning against his porch, sipping his morning coffee. He was quiet, always calm, the sort of person who made even the smallest troubles seem manageable. I waved frantically, hoping he could help. "Landon, please, will you help me find Buddy?" My voice trembled slightly, but there was no time to worry about pride. He set his cup down and nodded, a small, reassuring smile on his lips. "Of course, Emma, let's find him." We hurried toward the forest together. The air was crisp, scented with pine and damp earth. The sun had just started rising, but already the shadows in the forest felt long and heavy. Branches scratched at our sleeves and hair as we stepped over fallen logs, and the underbrush tugged at our shoes, slowing our pace. Every so often, we heard Buddy barking faintly, always a little farther ahead, teasing us with his playful, reckless freedom. As we walked, Landon fell into step beside me. His presence was quiet, solid, and oddly comforting. "You bring him here often?" he asked casually, though I could hear the concern in his voice. "Every day," I admitted, my voice softer now, embarrassed that I had lost him. He's like family. I don't know what I'd do if something happened to him." Landon nodded, his eyes scanning the trees. "I get it. Let's keep moving. He can't be too far. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes." Time seemed strange in the forest. The further we went, the darker it became. The sun disappeared behind the dense canopy, leaving long streaks of shadow that danced eerily across the forest floor. I stumbled on a root, and Landon caught my arm, steadying me with a gentle grip. "Careful," he said quietly, and I felt my heart thump in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Eventually, we reached a small clearing. Buddy was nowhere in sight. I sank onto a fallen log, trying to catch my breath, my hands trembling. Landon crouched beside me, pulling out a small flashlight from his backpack. "We'll find him," he said, his voice calm and certain, the kind of certainty I desperately wanted to believe. The first night in the forest fell fast. Darkness wrapped around us like a heavy blanket, thick and almost suffocating. Stars peeked through the branches, scattered and cold, while the distant calls of nocturnal animals echoed in the shadows. Buddy's barking seemed far away, and my hope wavered. I shivered despite my jacket, and Landon noticed, handing me a spare sweater he had tucked in his backpack. "Here, put this on," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes lingered just a little longer than necessary. We moved to a slightly higher patch of ground, hoping to get a better view. Landon set up a small makeshift space to sit, using his jacket as a cushion. I sat close to him, both of us scanning the darkness, listening for any sign of Buddy. There was a strange quiet between us, a mix of exhaustion and anticipation, the kind that made the heart race even without immediate danger. As the night deepened, our conversation softened. We spoke in whispers, sharing small stories. Mine about growing up with Buddy and the little adventures we had. His about the quiet life he'd led in this neighborhood, always observant but mostly unseen. The forest seemed to shrink around us as the words flowed, our shared concern for Buddy building an invisible bridge between our hearts. A light drizzle began, and Landon quickly pulled a small tarp from his bag, helping me cover myself. "Here, this will keep you dry," he said. The moment our hands brushed while adjusting the corners of the tarp, I felt a spark. Innocent, fleeting, yet unmistakable. I looked up at him. His eyes were fixed on mine for a heartbeat longer than necessary. And then he smiled softly, almost shyly, before returning to the task at hand. Buddy finally appeared, running out from the shadowed trees, wet but unharmed. Relief washed over me so strongly that I almost laughed through my tears. I knelt down, scooping him into my arms, feeling his fur against my cheek. Landon stayed back slightly, giving me space, though I could see the quiet warmth in his expression. We spent the rest of the night in that clearing, sitting close for warmth, talking quietly, and sharing stories we wouldn't have told anyone else. There was a safety in his presence I hadn't realized I was craving, a quiet intimacy that wasn't about words or touch, but simply being together. And though Buddy slept between us, sometimes nudging my hand for attention, I felt something new stirring inside me, a delicate, unspoken connection with someone who had been a stranger until just a few hours ago. By the time dawn approached, the forest looked less threatening, almost gentle in the first light of morning. My heart was still racing, but it wasn't just from fear anymore. There was a quiet hope mingling with the adrenaline, a fragile promise that this night had changed something, for both of us, forever. The forest felt different as the night deepened. Shadows stretched longer and darker, and every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, Buddy's soft whines, felt amplified. We had made a small camp in the clearing, and though Buddy slept soundly between us, the chill in the air made me huddle closer to Landon. He handed me another layer of his jacket, his hands brushing mine briefly. The touch sent a strange warmth through me, one I wasn't expecting in the cold night. We didn't speak much at first, simply listening to the forest around us. But as the hours passed, the quiet became a gentle invitation to talk. "It's strange," I said softly, "how the forest can feel so vast and frightening, yet somehow comforting too." Landon glanced at me, his expression thoughtful, and nodded. "It's all about who you're with," he said. "Sometimes the scariest places feel safe when there's someone beside you." I couldn't help but smile at that, feeling the truth of his words. We shared stories of our childhoods, mine filled with memories of playing fetch with Buddy, laughter echoing through empty fields and moments of quiet solitude. His about growing up in a small town, always observant, never quite fitting in but finding solace in simple routines. There was an ease between us, a natural rhythm that felt like we had known each other far longer than a single day. The rain picked up slightly, and we adjusted our tarp to keep dry. I shivered, and without a word, Landon pulled me closer, offering the warmth of his body beside mine. It wasn't a bold gesture, just a quiet, protective closeness, but it made my heart race in a way I hadn't anticipated. I felt safe with him, and yet there was a tension, an unspoken acknowledgement of something delicate forming between us. At one point, we laughed quietly over a clumsy attempt to start a small fire with damp twigs. Our hands met briefly as we reached for the same branch, and neither of us moved away immediately. The laughter faded into a comfortable silence, our eyes meeting in the dim glow of the flashlight Landon had set near the tarp. There was a softness in his gaze that made me feel both seen and cherished, an emotional intimacy I hadn't realized I craved. Hours passed, and the night deepened further. I found myself sharing things I hadn't told anyone. The small fears, the quiet hopes, the moments of loneliness that Buddy couldn't fill entirely. Landon listened, never interrupting, his eyes never leaving mine. And it was in that simple act of presence that I felt a connection stronger than words could describe. He shared in return small confessions, gentle truths about himself that revealed a quiet, steady heart beneath his calm exterior. At some point, the rain slowed to a mist, and we adjusted our blanket around us. Buddy snuggled close. Landon's hand brushed mine again, almost accidentally, and I didn't pull away. Instead, I let the warmth linger, the moment stretching longer than necessary. It was a subtle, innocent intimacy, our bodies close for comfort, our breaths mingling in the cold night air, hearts beating in a quiet rhythm that spoke louder than any words. I felt a strange mixture of emotions, gratitude for his help, admiration for his calm presence, and an unfamiliar stirring of desire, not lust, but a tender, emotional pull I couldn't ignore. Landon seemed to feel it too, a quiet awareness in his gaze, a softening of his voice when he spoke to me. We talked about trivial things to distract from the intensity of the unspoken tension, about favorite books, small dreams for the future, but beneath it all, the night wrapped us in a cocoon of shared vulnerability and trust. Buddy stirred occasionally, nudging me for warmth or attention, breaking the intensity with his innocent presence. Each time I laughed quietly, Landon's eyes met mine, and there was a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding of something quietly growing between us. I realized I had never felt so connected to another person, so seen in a way that didn't require words or explanations. The hours passed slowly, marked only by the changing sounds of the forest. Owls called in the distance, leaves whispered in the breeze, and somewhere far away water trickled over rocks. We stayed close, hands occasionally brushing, shoulders touching for warmth, our conversations drifting between light-hearted humor and quiet confessions. There was no rush, no expectation, only the growing bond of two people sharing a night they would never forget. By the time the first hints of dawn lightened the sky, I realized that something had shifted between us. The forest no longer felt ominous. Instead, it felt alive with possibility. The connection we had formed, built on shared vulnerability, quiet laughter, and gentle touches, was undeniable. Even Buddy seemed to sense it, wagging his tail softly as he nudged my hand, as if approving the unspoken bond between us. We sat in the quiet, watching the sky lighten, feeling the first warmth of the sun on our faces. I looked at Landon, and for the first time, I saw him not just as a helpful neighbor, but as someone who had entered my life in a way I hadn't expected. Someone who had shown me care and protection. Someone who had made the night frightening, endless and lonely, into something intimate, comforting, and unforgettable. As morning approached, we knew we would have to leave the forest soon, but neither of us spoke of it yet. Savoring the last moments of our night together, wrapped in blankets, hearts quietly racing, souls gently entwined by the shared experience. The forest had brought us together, and though the world outside awaited, something had changed forever between us. An unspoken promise, a delicate thread of connection that neither time nor distance could easily break. The first light of dawn filtered softly through the trees, painting the forest floor in gentle golds and pinks. The chill of the night had faded with the sun's warmth, leaving a calm, almost magical quiet around us. Buddy stirred, wagging his tail, and nudged me softly, reminding me that our night in the forest had finally come to an end. I laughed quietly, brushing the damp fur from his coat, and felt a flutter of gratitude for the little dog who had brought us together. Landon stretched beside me, the warmth of his body still lingering close. His eyes met mine, calm, steady, and full of something I couldn't quite name. There was a softness there, a quiet tenderness that lingered after the long night. Neither of us spoke at first. Words felt unnecessary. The forest had witnessed everything, our laughter, our confessions, our silent moments, and now, it seemed to hold a gentle promise of what might come next. We began the trek back toward the edge of the forest, Buddy bouncing ahead as if he had never been lost at all. The path seemed shorter now, the towering trees less intimidating, and even the thick underbrush felt lighter beneath our feet. Every so often Landon would glance at me, and our fingers brushed, barely, in the quietest of touches that made my heart race. There was no urgency, no expectation, just the unspoken connection between two people who had shared a night they would never forget. When we finally reached the edge of the forest, the suburban streets of our neighborhood came into view, bathed in the soft morning light. The contrast between the safety of the neighborhood and the wild intimacy of the forest was stark, and I realized how much the night had changed me. I was no longer just a woman who had lost her dog. I was someone who had discovered a new depth of emotion, a quiet bond with a person I had barely known before. "Thank you, Landon," I said softly, looking up at him. "I don't think I would have found him without you." He smiled, the same calm, reassuring smile from the night before, but now it seemed warmer, more personal. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "I'm glad I was here, and Buddy seems happy, so that's all that matters." We stood there for a moment, the morning sun warming our faces, and I felt an ache of reluctance. I didn't want this night to be just a memory. I wanted the bond we had formed to continue, even as the normal rhythm of life called us back. I glanced at Landon, and our eyes met in a moment of quiet understanding. There was a hint of something unspoken, a delicate promise hovering between us, fragile but undeniable. Buddy barked suddenly, breaking the moment, and we both laughed. I knelt down to scoop him up, feeling the familiar weight of his fur against my chest. Landon's gaze followed us, soft and thoughtful, and I felt a strange warmth spread through me, a mixture of affection, admiration, and a quiet longing I had never experienced before. As we walked the final few steps toward our homes, I realized that the night in the forest had changed everything. It wasn't just about finding Buddy or surviving the darkness. It was about discovering a connection that went beyond words, a quiet understanding between two hearts that had met under extraordinary circumstances. The forest had stripped away pretense and fear, leaving only honesty, care, and a subtle, tender attraction. When we reached my front porch, I paused, not ready to let go of the moment. "Will I see you later?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my heart thumped in my chest. Landon smiled, that same calm smile, but his eyes held a spark I hadn't seen before. "I'll be around," he said simply, but there was an underlying promise in his tone that made me hopeful. We exchanged a quiet goodbye, our hands brushing once more, and then I stepped inside, Buddy trotting happily at my heels. The house felt warmer somehow, filled not just with sunlight but with the lingering presence of the night's events. I sank onto the couch, Buddy curling beside me, and allowed myself a deep breath. The fear and uncertainty of the forest were behind us, but the emotional connection, the delicate intimacy, lingered, quietly powerful and entirely unexpected. I thought about Landon as I watched Buddy settle into a nap, and a small, contented smile spread across my face. There was a new possibility now, a sense of hope wrapped in the memory of a night that had begun with panic and ended in quiet revelation. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew that the bond we had formed was real, tender, and something worth exploring. The forest had given me more than just my dog back. It had given me the realization that connection can be found in the most unexpected places, that trust and care can grow even in a single night, and that sometimes the heart recognizes what the mind cannot yet name. As I looked out the window, the sun fully rising, I knew that life had shifted in ways I could feel, but not yet fully understand. And somewhere I knew Landon felt it too. It was a beginning, fragile and quiet, but entirely ours. And as Buddy stretched and yawned beside me, I felt a warm certainty. That night would linger in our hearts long after the forest had faded from view, leaving only the promise of something quietly, beautifully new.